I live in South Georgia, so things over here can be really shady. I go to this Walmart all the time, and I've never had problems with it whatsoever. I'm a 21-year-old male, so it's kind of weird that I was followed. Anyway, but here we go. I went shopping for groceries, doing my usual thing, and it was around 8:30 p.m. By the time I got done checking out, as I was walking out of the store, I noticed this older gentleman staring at me, all creepy. I just brushed it off until I noticed he was out in the parking lot, staring. As I was putting my groceries in my car, I decided to kind of hurry up the pace. I can defend myself. I'm a pretty muscular guy, but I don't like violence that much. I got in my car and started to drive away, and I thought that was that. I get about a mile down the road when this black pickup started riding my bumper. I slowed down and went off the road a little to let him pass, and he didn't. He kept pace. I finally braked, checked him, and he passed. But as he was doing that, I noticed it was the same old man. When he passed me, he checked me and tried to make me stop my car. This went on for about 10 minutes until I got very aggravated and passed him and sped off. I finally got home, went inside, and started to chill out when my Ring camera went off. I looked at the video from my phone, and this dude was on my porch. I called the cops, they came, but he was gone. So there wasn't anything they could do. This happened last night, and I'm kind of creeped out about that experience. My dad and I went hiking a few days ago. My dad is a waterfall fanatic, and he wants to see as many as possible. So he and I are hiking along a very pretty trail. We're hiking along a river. It's flowing nicely. There's mountains all around us. The trail is weaving around big, beautiful boulders. I'm hiking at most 30 feet ahead of him, looking for a spot to stop and have a sit-down picnic lunch. And as I rounded a blind curve in the trail, I just freeze. Sitting on a stump, maybe 10 feet off the right side of the trail, is a guy. He's wearing one of those colourful Baja hoodies with the hood pulled up and half a mask with rabbit ears. He sees me and stands up right as my dad rounds the corner. We are all three sizing each other up in silence, and my dad addresses him. "What's up, buddy?" The masked man tips his head as if he was deciding what to do with us, and then says back, "Not much. You aren't the guys I'm waiting for. Have a good day." And then he turns and jogs off quickly into the woods. Strapped on his lower back was a large hunting knife, and he had a pistol on his hip. We lost sight of him pretty quickly. We hadn't seen a soul on the trail all day, and we had been hiking for almost 3 hours. Needless to say, we left the waterfall for another day and quickly turned around. Once we were off the trail, we reported it to the local Forest Service and the police, but they said they couldn't do much aside from keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. The masked guy didn't have a backpack or water or anything, which makes me think he had either stashed it somewhere or was maybe camping and waiting nearby. I hate to admit it, but I desperately wanted to go after the guy and ask him who he was waiting for and why. I'm a 20-year-old female, and I live in a small town and go to college about 30 minutes from the main town that people go to in order to get groceries. My friends and I often take the trip to town late at night for cookout or to Walmart. This night, it was me and my friend Lisa, who's also 20, going to Walmart to look at the Halloween stuff. While we were there, we goofed off a bit, trying on masks and talking about different costumes we could make. We were looking at the candy, and I felt an eerie feeling. At first, I thought it was just my anxiety, so I got Lisa to just move into the book section a few aisles back. We were at different ends of the aisle, and I got the same feeling. I looked up from the book I had and looked around when I saw a man on the end closest to Lisa, seemingly looking at something at a display, but he gave me bad vibes. I got closer to Lisa and got her to follow me back up to the front where the feminine products and makeup were. We got there, and once again, I saw him standing next to the fake nails. I then picked up a random bath bomb and then dragged her to the back of the store where the milk was, and he followed us there. We made our way quickly through a few aisles and to the self-checkout, where we checked out and went outside. I had us both run to my car and locked us in because I could see him walking towards us. I started my car and drove as fast as I could so he wouldn't see my college sticker on my window. Thankfully, we made it all the way back to campus. So I started working at Coles, a small department store in St. Louis, in October of 2009. I think it must have been July 2010 when I quit, because I was just so uncomfortable around this guy. But I can't remember completely. I was 27 years old, and I'd only been living over here for about 2 years. I worked 6-hour shifts on either side of the store. The missus registers, or men's, it changed every shift. I worked usually from 8 a.m. until 2 p.m. This creepy guy, Don, was cleaning and maintenance, and he worked 6 a.m. until 2 p.m. So he was always there when I arrived in the morning. Of course, I didn't know he was creepy at first. He was in his 60s and introduced himself to me as Don, said he was divorced and had a daughter in her 20s, and she had 2 young kids. He acted like a friendly guy, but my gut just got creepy vibes from him. So I usually had 1 or 2 other cashiers on the registers around me during the busy part of the shift. There were multiple registers, like at Target, but sometimes between 8 to 10 a.m. I was often alone. So not long into the job, I was getting acquainted with people, and it was mostly ladies. I would check people with the things that they would buy: clothes, shoes, accessories, pajamas, pretty much everything. When no one was needed to be checked out, I'd tidy up the clothing racks in my area. I would notice Don. He was always in my area. Whether I was on the missus or the men's side of the store, he would be cleaning floors and the glass areas. I'd see him 10 feet up on ladders cleaning lights, and had a strong gut feeling he was looking at me, looking down my tops. I would even catch him. Closer to Halloween, he heard me talking to some girls wanting to go to my first haunted house. A day later, he came to me and he said he was planning a haunted house trip and a bunch of people were going. So I said I would go. But when I asked amongst the girls I knew, only 2 others said they were invited, and they were also in their 20s. Most of the women that worked there, that he also knew for some time, were in their 40s and older. So I knew it was a creep thing that he was only asking the younger girls. So I said nope to that and felt very strange about him. He would always want to talk to me at my register in the mornings when I was alone. He started complimenting on how I look about every shift that I worked. In the mornings when we had team meetings, everyone would just stand up in a group and he would stare at me, like really stare at me from just a foot away. And when I would look at him, he would say things like, "You look really good today. You have the bluest eyes I've ever seen. You're a very attractive girl." It would happen every shift he worked on with me, and I was really getting uncomfortable by this point. So I started asking the other ladies that knew him longer than I did, was he creepy? The older lady said, "Oh no, he's just a sweet old man who gets lonely. He's a good guy. He'd loaned one of them money from time to time. He loves his daughter and grandkids and is completely harmless, and I should just be nice to him." I knew they were wrong, that his vibe towards them was different as they were older. So I asked one of my friends that was my age. She was from Russia. She told me she felt the exact same way that I did, said he also would compliment her on how she looked and look down her top from ladders as well. I decided to try and avoid him. In February of 2010, he heard me talking about going to see the Friday the 13th remake for Valentine's Day with my husband. Just like overhearing me, a day later, he came to my register with a bag of 5 or so horror movies he thought I might like to borrow from his home collection. I can't remember all the movies that he brought. I remember thinking all the movies looked like old, gross horror movies, like the perverted kind. So I told him, no thank you. Said I wouldn't have time to watch them or something. I didn't want to take anything from him in case I needed to make a complaint to management. I didn't want him to say we were friends and that I was borrowing things from him. Another instance was me being at work sick with a cold. I was all chilly and sniffling, coughing, you know. I was tidying up the clothing racks and he noticed I was sick. He asked me what was wrong, so I just said, "Oh, I've got a cold." And he tried to be like, "Oh, poor thing." A few hours later, he came to me at my register and gave me a bag with tissues, ibuprofen, and a small panda bear toy. He told me he'd bought them for me, hoping it would make me feel better. This made me so uncomfortable, and I put it under my register. I took it home and showed my husband, gave the toy to my dog, and threw the rest away. My husband told me to tell management, but I felt like they wouldn't see anything wrong in what he was doing. That they wouldn't punish him just because I've got gut feelings of him being a creep. I mean, it wasn't like he touched me. So instead of possibly getting him fired for what others would say was just him being nice, I decided to just look for another job. A few months later, once I got a new job, I quit because I was so uncomfortable seeing him. I hated going to work every day, seeing him look at me, hearing him talk about how I look. I was just over it. I think it was during 2010 when I learned about his past. It's just a bit hard to remember. I was home one day, in my bedroom, with the 5 o'clock news on the TV, and I hear his name. An employee at the local Coles department store had been arrested today for exposing himself to a 7-year-old girl shopping in the store with her grandmother. The girl had told her grandmother what had happened, and then the grandmother called the police. They went on to say that he was a registered offender who had previously spent time in prison after being convicted of assaulting 3 young girls in the 1980s. They then flashed his photo on the screen. My blood ran cold and I let out a scream I couldn't even control. I felt sick. My husband came running into the room to ask what was wrong, and all I could do was point to the TV. My husband told me I should have complained to management about him, but I didn't know how sick and twisted he was. My gut was telling me that there was something really wrong with him. I just didn't know what. It's the closest I've come to a very sick and evil person.